am today. I'm sitting here in Colorado where it's snowing right now, and it was about 55 yesterday, and it's supposed to be 55 again tomorrow. So typical Colorado weather, up one day, down the next. I'm here today because the people at Young Living asked me to give a presentation so that people have a little bit better understanding of what the parameters of claims are for people to make permissible claims for dietary supplements in particular. And so hopefully at the end of this seminar today, you'll have a good understanding of the types of claims that are allowed for dietary supplements and what you really need to have in order to make those claims and what the effect of making those claims are on both the company itself and on the individual people that are marketing and selling the product. So what we're going to cover today is FDA regulation and what the FDA generally looks at in terms of intent and the types of claims that can be made, and also FTC regulation and things that they look at in terms of endorsements and testimonials, material connections, and monitoring of affiliates, distributors, and marketers of the product. So the first thing I wanted to talk about a little bit is who regulates the claims. You know, from a federal standpoint, the Food and Drug Administration, or the FDA, regulates labeling. So the FDA really focuses on the content of the claims and whether the claims that you're making are permissible for the type of product that you have. On the other side, the FTC regulates advertising. So the FTC actually doesn't really look at whether those types of claims are permissible for the type of product. The FTC is never going to get involved and say, you're making a disease claim, because that's not their decision to make. What the FTC looks at is to make sure that all the claims that you're making are truthful, they're not misleading, and that you have the proper science and substantiation for claims. Both the FDA and the FTC require that all claims have to have competent and reliable scientific evidence to support the claims. And it really becomes a balancing act between having science to support the claims while also not making disease claims for non-drug products. So we're going to talk a little bit today about where that line is on the balancing act between permissible claims and non-permissible claims. So the first kind of organization we're going to look at in the area is the Food and Drug Administration. As I said, the FDA regulates labeling, and it's really important to have a fundamental understanding of what labeling consists of so that you know what it is the FDA is going to be looking at. So in the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, which is the main body of laws that govern foods, beverages, dietary supplements, and other products regulated by the FDA, labeling is defined as the label on the product itself and any other written, printed, or graphic material that accompanies a product. And you know, the problem, unfortunately, with a lot of these laws and regulations is that they were made in the era prior to there ever being anything known as the Internet. So a lot of times we have to interpret what that means with regard to the Internet. So when we look at labeling, it could include brochures, it can include infomercials if the product is being offered for sale, and it can include websites. And this is probably one of the most important things to understand is that websites are considered labeling. So if you have product for sale on a website, then any information on the website has to comply with the same rules as if it was directly on the label of the product. Social media. Is social media labeling? Social media in most respects is not labeling because you're not offering the product for sale on the social media site. But, and this is maybe one of the most important things to remember, especially in terms of the setup that Young Living has for marketing products through distributors and members, is that even if an item does not meet the definition of labeling, the FDA has indicated that they can review any information disseminated about the product for evidence of what the true intent of the company is to sell a product. So when we're talking about intent, the FDA can establish intent through a number of different sources, including product labels and labeling, catalogs, brochures, books, audio and videotapes, websites, social media, and even oral presentations in meetings. So just because it's not labeling doesn't mean that it still might go to the overall intent of the company. And why do we care about intent? Well, at the end of the day, the FDA is going to look at what the overall intent is of a company to sell a product in determining whether that product is really properly characterized as a dietary supplement, as a food and beverage, or as a drug. So regardless of how you label a product, you can label a product all you want as a dietary supplement and include supplement facts. But if you're making claims that are disease claims, intending to affect the structure or function of the body to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent a disease, then the FDA is going to say the true intent of the company is to sell this product as a drug for disease purposes. So this issue of intent is really key. Any information disseminated about a product by a company or by its representatives may form intent. So even if Young Living's regular website properly characterizes all the products as a dietary supplement and doesn't make any disease claims, if there are distributors out there who are creating their own websites, creating their own social media pages that talked about a product for treatment of disease purposes, that intent is going to be attributed back to the company. And the connection to the company is key. A nonprofit organization made up of employees or distributors is still going to be tied back to the company as evidence of intent. And this goes back to, I know a lot of times when I talk with companies, people talk about, well, I have a First Amendment right to say what I want about a product. And you do. But when you are in the commercial business of selling a product, you don't have the same First Amendment right protections that you do to regular speech. Commercial speech is not entitled to First Amendment rights in most cases. So once you are a distributor of the product, you are have to follow the same laws and regulations as the company in marketing and selling that product. And that is a big distinction in a multi-level marketing company or in a company where you have a number of distributors. If I buy a product in a store and I like it and I go tell other friends about it, I can say whatever I want about that product. But if I'm turning around and I'm either being paid by the company or I'm getting some sort of profit sharing from having other people buy the product, now what I say does matter because it gets attributed back to the company. So that's a really important and fundamental aspect to understand in terms of marketing and selling products. Here are some examples of information that could establish the intent to sell a dietary supplement product as a drug. Again, we talked about social media pages, forums, and groups created and run by distributors that talk and offer products for disease purposes. Testimonials and personal experiences regarding disease treatment, given that meetings run by the company or by its distributors, affiliates, and associates. And again, this is, not because, I'm trying to tell you how not, to put a stifle on selling the product in the best way you know how to do it or to talk about how great it is, because I know from talking to people that there are very great personal experiences that people have with both these products and other products of people that I know. But at the end of the day, unfortunately, the law is, and Congress decided that you cannot sell a non-drug product to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent a disease. So you may have all of the personal stories that you have about great benefits from the product and about treating diseases, but unfortunately you cannot share them in the process of marketing or selling products. Books written by members of the company or distributors that promote products for particular disease purposes could be attributed back to the company as intent to sell dietary supplement products as drugs. As I said, to be clear, the First Amendment right to freedom of speech does not, in most instances, apply to commercial speech promoting products. When you take a look at claims, and when the FDA reviews claims, they look at claims and they can be express or they can be implied. So express claims would be something like Young Living peppermint oil is great for arthritic pain. I mean, clearly that is a disease claim. It's addressing, arthritis and pain associated with arthritis. Take Young Living Thieves at the first indication you are getting a cold or infection. Again, the FDA treats cold and flu. They treat infections as disease. And we're going to talk in a little bit about what the specific definition is of disease that the FDA looks at when they're looking at these types of claims. Implied claims, may discuss the benefits of particular ingredients in a product without mention of the product. This is another area where I see a lot of companies run into trouble with. If you're talking about the main ingredients in your product and the benefits that those ingredients will provide, that is treated as implied claims that your product will do the same thing. So if I've got a product that contains, ginkgo and ginger and green tea, and I talk about how great green tea is at reducing the risk of cardiovascular disease, I'm essentially making a claim that my product that contains green tea will reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease. And of course, that would be a non-permissible disease claim. So the fact that you're not mentioning the product is somewhat irrelevant if you're discussing the main ingredients in the product. The FDA will treat those as claims for the product. Articles indicating that natural therapies like essential oils work best in the early stages of cancer. References to articles that talk about the ingredients or the product itself and its treatment of disease would be considered disease treatment. So let's say you have your own personal website and you read this great article in the paper about someone was taking essential oils and they used to have a lot of problems with arthritic pain and now they don't anymore. And they talk about how peppermint oil is great for that. Even if it's not a Young Living product, if you post that article on your website where you are also offering products for sale, that is going to be treated as an implied claim that your product that also contains peppermint oil is going to help with cancer. So again, references to articles or scientific studies that talk about disease treatment are implied claims that your product will also assist with that. As we talked about, personal experiences with recovering from a disease or condition and use of Young Living products will certainly be treated as disease claims. Again, I'm not saying that there aren't cases out there and that this isn't even an issue of substantiation, although with personal experiences and testimonials there often is. But you could have all the science in the world that backs up that your Young Living essential oils will help people with disease. The fact is that Congress has decided you cannot sell a dietary supplement for those purposes. So regardless of all the proof and all of the great stories that you have, it's just simply not a purpose for which Young Living products can be sold for. When we talk about claims, there's really three types of claims that are permitted for foods, beverages, and dietary supplements. Those are structure function claims, which most of you are probably familiar with, nutrient content claims, and health claims. And I'm really going to focus on structure function claims. I don't believe that nutrient content claims probably come up as much in essential oils. I'll talk about those very briefly, but those are usually the claims like high in calcium, rich in vitamin C, those types of claims. In general, those aren't what we're talking about when we're talking about essential oils. The structure function claims are claims like helps promote bone health, helps reduce weight, helps reduce body fat, now helps support your child's immunity. Those are the types of structure function claims that we're talking about, and really what I call the building blocks of claims for products. Structure function claims or statements are the most common building block claims that describe a particular nutrient or ingredient and its effect on the structure or function of the body. So things like help support a healthy immune system. Generally, you'll see words like supports, maintains, and promotes, because at the end of the day, we go back to the mantra. Hopefully all of you know this already, but if not, if you don't remember anything else, again, it's you can't sell a product to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent a disease. So most of the permissible claims and the parameters that we can work in are talking about supporting, maintaining, or promoting already normal or healthy conditions, supporting a healthy immune system, maintaining a healthy digestive system. Generally, you don't use words like treats, prevents, or cures. Now, technically, you could use the words treat, prevent, or cures if you're relating to a non-disease or dysfunction of the body. But what I have found is that most of the time when you get into using those words, it's hard not to find yourself wander over into the area of disease claims. So generally, I recommend not using those types of words because it's essentially a yellow flag to the FDA or the FTC saying, you know, it's likely that they're going to get into disease treatment by going in that manner. There's no pre-approval necessary for structured claims from the FDA, but manufacturers have to submit claims within 30 days of making them. And under Section 6 of DSHEA, this is the disclaimer that you see on most dietary supplements. We find the statement, these statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Again, I can't say it enough. The number one rule to live by: a food, beverage, or supplement product may not be intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent a disease. If it does, it will be considered a drug by the FDA. Again, as we talked about, it doesn't matter if a company can provide substantiation that a supplement or food product does help with disease. This is because Congress decided only drugs may be offered to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent a disease. Mention of specific diseases like diabetes, HIV, cancer are clear red flags to the FDA. If you mention specific diseases, that's the surest way for the FDA to get involved in it and take action. So disease is actually defined in the regulations at 21 CFR 101-93G. And it is helpful to know what the FDA's definition of disease is because it's probably a little bit wider than what you generally think of as disease. It's damage to an organ, part, structure, or system of the body such that it does not function properly, such as the main diseases you would think of, cardiovascular disease and others, or a state of health leading to such dysfunction. So prediabetes or hypertension would also be considered disease by the FDA. Probably the easiest way to kind of have a discussion about what are disease claims other than the very express type of claims is I'm going to go through, there are 10 categories of products that are likely to be considered disease claims by the FDA. And it's in the regulation. They set forth kind of 10 different examples. So I'm going to run through those quickly because I think it'll be helpful, and I see one question already. Someone's asked it, and I'll be able to answer that here with one of these categories of claims. So the first category, again, are the express claims on a disease or class of diseases. And these are pretty straightforward and pretty obvious. You know, blank product will help reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease. You know, Young Living, whatever, peppermint oil will prevent colds and flu. Claims that otherwise describe a disease but don't mention it specifically by name are certainly still considered disease. So you can't just avoid, you know, the specific name but describe it such that people would know what you're talking about anyway. Relieves crushing heart pain would, you know, be viewed as referencing heart attacks. Prevents bone fragility, osteoporosis. Controls blood sugar in people with insufficient insulin, you know, diabetes. remember, claims about ingredients that are contained in products are claims about the product. So again, if you talk about how ginger helps reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease and ginger is the main claim in your product, then that is going to be deemed a disease claim for the product. Second kind of category of claims are that claims have an effect on a characteristic sign or symptom of a disease. So you have to think about, is it a condition that suggests the product is intended to affect a particular disease? So claims about reduction in cholesterol are deemed to be implied claims that this product will treat heart disease or prevent heart disease. Claims about reducing joint pain almost assuredly will be viewed as treating arthritis. You can make a claim that either, so there are some symptoms that might be both disease, applied to diseases, as well as might not necessarily be diseases. When you have symptoms like that that might pertain to a disease or not, the FDA basically takes the position that unless you qualify the claim, you are responsible for any reasonable interpretation, and therefore it's going to be a disease claim. So you can make a claim that specifies it is more for a non-disease purpose or qualifies it as maintaining already healthy conditions. So one of the main claims that kind of gets into this area is inflammation. You can talk about reducing inflammation associated with muscle fatigue from exercise, but you can't just make a general reduces inflammation claim, or the FDA is likely to treat that as an arthritis claim. Similarly, you might have some other conditions that may or may not be disease, depending on the severity of it. So you can talk about mild depression, you can talk about occasional depression, but once you get into the more permanent depression, chronic depression, it then implies some more disease type of conditions like manic depression or some other more debilitating form of depression. So in instances like depression, like anxiety, like stress, you really need to clarify this is for occasional stress. This is for temporary stress, so that you don't run into the possibility of FDA treating it as a post-traumatic stress disorder type of claim. Again, we talked about cholesterol. You can make a claim that this will maintain cholesterol levels already within the normal range, but you can't talk about just reducing cholesterol because that implies that, in fact, that someone might have a heart disease type of problem. The third one that I want to talk about is a question that someone brought up, which was whether PMS is a disease according to the FDA. And you are allowed to make claims about an effect on a normal condition associated with a natural state or process, but not an abnormal condition. So claims associated with normal conditions would be things like mild mood changes, cramps associated with the menstrual cycle, PMS. We had a question from someone, could you say you can cure PMS symptoms? And that is probably a situation in which you could use the word cure. Again, as long as you had proof that it actually would do that, that would likely be a situation where you're talking about a non-disease situation. Again, you can talk about normal conditions associated with a natural state. So non-cystic acne, mild memory or hair loss associated with aging, as long as you make it specific that it's mild and associated with aging. Where you get into abnormal conditions are things like Alzheimer's. So that would be the more serious end of the mild memory loss associated with aging. Alzheimer's or senile dementias, cystic acne, toxemia associated with pregnancy. Those are the areas where they would be considered more abnormal conditions and not a natural state or process. So again, you can use cure. My general recommendation is to stay away from it because it's hard to get into that category without running into problems. But there are certain situations, and the PMS claim would probably be one of those, in which you would be able to make that type of claim. So the fourth kind of category of claims are implied disease claims because of a product name, formulation, pictures, or citations to disease conditions. So I see these type of products a lot, and these are some where we see warning letters from the FDA. Implied disease claims because of a product name, formulation, pictures, or citations. So something like arthritic cure, clearly implying that this is going to be a cure for arthritis. Something like, cold and flu be gone. See a lot of cold and flu types of things. Those claims are disease claims. It doesn't matter if you've only got a partial part of the disease or you misspell the word. So if you misspell flu as F-L-E-W for like bird flu away, that's still going to be considered a disease claim. As we talked about before, citations made to publications with disease treatment, they are treated as disease claims. So if you cite to a study that talks about peppermint oil and its use in, as an adjunct to chemotherapy treatment, and that's the name of the study, that's going to be treated as a disease claim. Technically, if you provided a bibliography of links, that by itself would not be considered a disease claim. But again, it's pretty hard to do that without running into trouble. Pictures or symbols may be disease claims. The FDA has determined that a heart with an EKG going on it, whether the EKG is a healthy or an unhealthy EKG, the FDA considers that to be a disease claim for the treatment or prevention of heart disease. And the main reason for that is most people don't know what a healthy EKG would be as opposed to an unhealthy EKG. So regardless of that, once you start putting the EKG over the heart, it's likely to be considered a disease claim. I see another question up here that is a good question, and it's probably the #1 question that I get from people all the time. And I wanted to address it briefly, and that is, you're telling us we can't make these claims, and we understand we want to follow the law, but we see on TV ads, we go online, and there's 50 people saying exactly what you're telling us that we can't say. And my best answer to that is, all I can do is tell you what the law is, and you guys as a company have to decide how you're going to follow the law or not. My analogy usually is to the speed limit, and the speed limit might be here in Colorado 65 on the highway, and you can choose to go 60 like some people do to be ultra cautious. You can go 65 to 67 and a couple miles over the speed limit, which most people do, and you can choose to go 85 and hope that there's no one with a radar gun down at the end of the block. And all I can tell you is about the people that you see on TV and that you see on the internet is that they're speeding and hoping that there's no one with a radar gun down there. And some of them might not know what the speed limit is, but of course in the law, ignorance of the law is not an excuse for the law. So simply put is, at some point you have to decide whether you're going to follow the law or not. And the law is, as we talked about, there may be some great studies on certain ingredients, and there may be some great stories about it, but you just simply can't sell products for those purposes. The fifth category of product is structure function claims, and claims that a product belongs to a class of products that are intended to diagnose, treat, cure, prevent a disease. So analgesics, antibiotics, a lot of the antis are going to end up being disease claims. Antidepressants, antimicrobials, antiseptics, antivirals, anti-inflammatories, and vaccines. All, when you make those claims, this product's an antibiotic, this product's an antimicrobial, that is going to be considered a disease claim by the FDA. Claims to be a substitute for a product that is a therapy for a disease. So claims that suggest take this product, again, I'm picking on peppermint oil, but I'm going to say take peppermint oil instead of chemotherapy. Again, that would clearly be considered a disease claim, even if you don't make any claims. If you're essentially implying that this is going to have some of the same benefits and do the same things as chemotherapy, which would be a disease claim. We've seen warning letters to companies, the natural alternative to a drug, such as herbal Prozac. There's a picture here of something, the natural antidepressant. That might be okay, but again, then it's talking about equivalent of a prescription dose of Prozac. Essentially, you're saying take these. So this is a case even, and this happens, and we see warning letters about it. You can have a regular food. If I'm selling a bag of cashews, and I say it's the equivalent of a prescription dose of Prozac and a natural antidepressant, my cashews are now drugs in the eyes of the FDA. And I can probably hear an audible groan from everyone, but that is the way that the FDA looks at those. Claims that a product will have fewer side effects than a therapy for a disease. Take blank. It has all the benefits without the side effects of a particular drug. Again, you're basically offering it up as an alternative or a replacement for a specific drug product. Number 7 is claims to augment a therapy or drug intended to diagnose, mitigate, treat, cure, prevent a disease. Again, use as part of your diet when taking insulin to help maintain a healthy blood sugar level. You can make that same claim and a permissible claim, just not mentioning insulin. So use as part of your diet to help maintain a healthy blood sugar level is a permissible claim. But once you add the insulin part into it, you're making it essentially an assistance to a drug therapy and making it a disease claim. Structure function claims that a product will have a role in the body's response to a disease or to a vector of a disease. So supports the body's antiviral capabilities, supports the body's ability to resist infection. Of course, we can go with the kind of the old standby of supports the immune system, but you can't talk specifically about what it's doing to, because that goes to the prevent disease category of claims. Claims to treat, prevent, or mitigate adverse events associated with a therapy for a disease. So again, reduces the nausea associated with chemotherapy, helps avoid diarrhea associated with antibiotic use. You can offer products that talk about treating a nutrient deficiency caused by a therapy. So you could say helps restore vitamin B depletion associated with and blank a particular drug, then that would be a permissible claim. The last category is essentially the catch-all, as the FDA basically left open a regulation that says anything else that we can think of that might suggest an effect on a disease will be covered by the catch-all. In reality, the FDA doesn't generally use that category because it usually falls into one of the other categories, but it is possible that it could come up with something else, so I just put it there for you to understand. That's really structure function claims. In a nutshell, we can again go back to the mantra, which is it can't intend to diagnose, treat, cure, prevent a disease. Remember that mantra. Think about whether this is in some way suggesting that it will treat disease or some symptom of a disease, and you're probably a long way there in being able to decide whether it's a permissible claim or not. I talked about nutrient content claims. I put the slide in here as much just so people have that for their records. These, again, are claims like something that's high in a particular nutrient or low in a nutrient, contains more or less. There are specific regulations that identify them. You can only make them for nutrients or ingredients which actually have daily value. Again, because if there's no daily value, then it's hard to know whether it's high or low in something. So it's, again, those are specific claims that you can find, and they really go more to products that have nutrition fact panels and have, you know, a high amount of protein, dietary fiber, vitamin C, those types of things. Two main characteristics of there's also things called health claims. These are specific claims that have been identified by the FDA and describe the relationship between a food component or dietary ingredient and the reduction in risk of a disease or health-related condition. There are specific types of health claims that are set out in the regulations. not really going to apply in this case because there really are no health claims that are specifically approved for essential oils. These are things like diets low in saturated fats may reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease. Diets high in omega-3s may reduce the risk, but there are none for essential oils. FDA regulation is really the primary focus probably of where a lot of your claims are going to be in terms of are these disease claims or not, because that really is probably the central focus of a lot of the types of claims that you want to be making to market and sell the product. But I did want to touch on FTC regulation because there's a couple important points to note, and especially with respect to endorsements and testimonials, which is an area that I find a lot of lack of understanding. The FTC is the primary federal agency that monitors advertising. It's charged with Section 5 of the FTC Act, the Truth in Advertising Law. And Truth in Advertising Law basically says that all advertising has to be truthful, not misleading, and have adequate substantiation. So substantiation just basically means you have to have scientific support to back it up. You can't make claims just based on the fact that someone believes that it did this. And that's the biggest problem with testimonials is I understand that people say, hey, I took this product and now I don't have gout anymore, or I never get colds and flus. But in many situations, personal testimonials are inherently somewhat unreliable because people forget about some of the other things that they were doing when that happened. This especially happens in weight loss where they say, well, I take this product and I lost 20 pounds, and they forget to mention that, oh yeah, and I was also training on for a half marathon, so I was running 25 miles a week. Or I was doing some other things. So personal testimonials, while anecdotal might be helpful, they're not reliable as scientific evidence on their own. A lot of times FDA has required 2 double-blind placebo-controlled clinical trials. That's not the standard, but that's usually the gold standard that the FTC would like to see, and they're going to review them on a case-by-case basis. Endorsements are really one of the biggest areas and one of the most effective ways of selling products, but also one of the areas in which there's some of the biggest issues. An endorsement is any advertising message that consumers are likely to believe reflect the opinions, beliefs, findings, or experiences of a party other than the sponsoring advertiser, even if the views expressed by that party are identical to those of the sponsoring advertiser. So endorsements can be verbal statements, they can be liking or retweeting claims, and in the last year or so we have seen several warning letters from the FDA to companies that they have essentially said we're making disease claims because they liked or retweeted a disease claim made by someone else. So let's say on Young Living's own webpage, someone says, man, I love the Young Living product. I take Young Living Thieves, and, I don't have, I used to have arthritis, and now, I can run around and do whatever I want to. The company, if it's just someone posting on the website, the company hasn't made that claim yet at this point. It's someone else's opinion. It's a different webinar to talk about whether the company has the duty to take that down. But if the company then liked that posting or decided to respond to it and say, that's so great, we're glad that you love Thieves and are happy that you're enjoying the benefits, essentially they are now acknowledging or endorsing that statement, and it becomes a statement of the company. And that's going to take us demonstrations, depictions of the name, signature, likeness, or other identifying personal characteristics of an individual, all to be deemed as endorsements. So an example, I'm going to run through this kind of quickly. A television advertisement for a particular type of golf balls shows a well-known golfer hitting drives off a tee. This is an endorsement even if the golfer doesn't make any statements, similar with a race car driver. Probably, in terms of essential oils, A consumer not affiliated with the company purchases essential oils and writes in her own personal blog that she doesn't get colds and flus anymore. Let's put aside for the fact that it's not a multi-level marketing. There's no pyramid types of things, but it's just someone who bought the product, kind of like I talked about before. They can write whatever they want to about a product. There's no connection to the company. It wouldn't be an endorsement to the company. If the consumer got the essential oils for free because a store or online site generated a coupon for a free trial, it's still not an endorsement. But if the consumer is affiliated with the company, either as an employee, a distributor, or a blogger paid to write about the product, the personal experience is now an endorsement attributable to the company. So again, as I said, if in the situation of a multi-level marketing company, a company using distributors, if that person then writes about their experience and they're continuing to market and sell the product to other people, that is going to be an endorsement that's attributable to the company. Endorsements must reflect the honest opinions, findings, beliefs, or experiences of the endorser. They must be a bona fide user of the product when they're representing it. Both advertisers, and this is another important thing for people to realize, both advertisers and endorsers may be liable for improper endorsements. So and an advertiser may use an endorsement only so long as it has good reason to believe that the endorser continues to describe to the view presented. And an advertiser should, this is really more for the company, again, when you're using endorsements to make sure that people still agree with it. Example here would be a building contractor states he likes to use a certain paint because of its properties. The company reformulates the paint to cover with only one coat. Prior to that, the advertiser should check to make sure they still agree with it. What I really wanted to talk about more was consumer testimonials. And probably the most important thing to understand, again, is once a consumer testimonial is used in the marketing or advertising of a product by the company or by representatives of the company, like distributors, those statements become adopted statements of the company. So you cannot use an endorsement or testimonial to market or advertise a product that says something that the company could not have expressly said on its own. They also have to have the same level of proof that direct claims would have to be made. So even if someone is making a permissible claim, an endorsement or testimonial, if you don't have proof as to the fact that that product will actually provide those benefits, you shouldn't be using the testimonial. It's not just someone's opinion or belief that it's true. You have to have actual competent and reliable evidence to support it. As an example, brochure for baldness treatment contains numerous testimonials of people who claim that they had amazing hair growth after using the product. The advertiser must have competent and reliable scientific evidence to support the claims that the product produces hair growth. And the advertiser must also have substantiation that new users will experience similar results. And if you don't, you have to use a disclaimer that you should not expect to have similar results is not sufficient. You have to have a disclaimer that actually discloses what the typical person can expect. The best example is in weight loss, and this is where we see the most use of consumer testimonials. You'll see an example like, I lost 50 pounds in 6 months with Weight Away product. The ad conveys that the typical person will lose 50 pounds in 6 months. If consumers cannot expect such results, the ad should disclose the expected results, such as in a 90-day clinical study, the average person lost a total of 5 pounds per month. If the advertiser does not have substantiation of the expected results, then you shouldn't be making specific claims of weight loss. And you would just need to say something like, will help with weight management, will help with weight loss, but not talk about the specific amount of the weight loss. There's one way in which you can do it, and that's when you describe the specific conditions under which the results were achieved. So if you say, instead of I lost 50 pounds in 6 months with Weight Away, if you say, I took the Weight Away shake twice a day, every day for 6 months. In addition, I walked for 30 minutes every day and met with a personal trainer twice a week. If you, under those circumstances, I also cut my diet down from whatever it used to be, 3,000 calories a day down to 2,200 calories a day. If you provide those specific examples of how you lost your weight, then you could potentially use that specific example of weight loss without knowing what everyone could expect. The last kind of area I wanted to talk about, and then I can try to answer some of the questions that I haven't addressed yet. And you can submit questions, I think they told you, by typing them in here. And additionally, you can submit questions. I'll ask Julie to put it up there again because I forget, to a specific, to the particular team, and they will answer them for you. So the conduct team, I believe, is what she had said. Material connections are any material connection between the endorser and the seller of a product that are not reasonably expected by the audience must be disclosed. And this is an area where the FTC has gotten more involved in the last several years. So a material connection are those connections that might materially affect the weight or credibility of the endorsement. So these are things that relate to personal, financial, or business connections between the person making the endorsement and the company that's behind the product. This doesn't mean that a company, that endorsement should not be believed or that it's not valid, but it's just something that the FTC has said people should know in order to make a decision. So this would be, let's say you have a great endorsement or testimonial about someone who lost 30 pounds in the last 60 days using a weight loss product. The person making the testimonial happens to be the CEO and president of the company. In order for that to be a valid use of the testimonial, that testimonial should be accompanied by just a short statement that says, John Jones, president, CEO, so that people know. It doesn't mean that it's not true, but it means that people should at least know who it is making this claim so they can decide what weight they want to give to the claim. An example here would be an advertisement, a blog entry, or a social media entry features the testimonial of a man touting the great night's sleep he had after using valerian essential oil. The man is actually a principal, an employee, or a distributor of the company. While the testimonial is permissible, the relationship, that would be of, the man to the company must be disclosed as a material connection. So again, it doesn't take anything more than just in parentheses or a dash afterwards saying distributor, Kathy, distributor of Young Living products, Mark, vice president of, marketing, Young Living essential oils, just something to disclose what the connection is. Again, as a doctor, the doctor gives an endorsement in an advertisement for a product stating that it's the best she has ever seen. It's likely that consumers would expect that the doctor was compensated for that ad. However, if the doctor also has an ownership interest in the company selling the product, that is a connection that consumers are unlikely to expect and should be disclosed. Social media is an area that I wanted to talk about briefly. Most of the issues are with blogging involve material connections. However, you have to remember that intent may be attributed to the company if there is a connection. Earlier example I had, if there's a relationship between the blogger and an advertiser that could affect the credibility of the review, the relationship should be disclosed. The disclosure can be as simple as company blank gave me this product to try. But you have to disclose that. And again, social media, from advertising perspective, is responsible for the same rules and complying with the same things as any other form of advertisement. And it often makes it harder to do so. So when you're tweeting and you have only 140 characters to make a statement you have to be careful that you leave enough room to provide a material disclosure or connection. So if you're tweeting something like, wow, you know, well, it's two different things, I guess. So let's say you have a, if you're just posting on someone else's page and you happen to be a distributor, you should probably be disclosing that. If you have your own page and you have already disclosed up front that you are a distributor of the product, then you wouldn't need to disclose each and every tweet that you make about it. Affiliate marketing and monitoring is, you know, again, I put this on here more so that you understand what the obligations are of the company to monitor their affiliates or distributors. Companies are, especially by the FTC, required to monitor their affiliates. In this case, affiliates have to disclose their material connections. If you have a website that contains links to a retailer and affiliates get paid, there was an issue a couple of years ago with some marketers of acai berry weight loss products, and it was all set up like it was coming from this independent source. And in fact, the affiliates were being paid to direct traffic to the company. That's a disclosure that needs to be made. What I wanted to talk about was, and here's the acai, it's going to be on this presentation, but I wanted to get to one other item here before trying to answer a few questions and before our time runs out. Advertisers are expected to have a program in place to train and monitor their affiliate marketers or distributors. And the scope of the program really depends on the risk of the harm, but it really should include an explanation to members of the network about what they can and can't be said about the product. You have to have a reasonable monitoring program to check out what affiliates are saying about the product. And the company really needs to have some sort of repercussions for non-compliance. And the FTC, when they go in and talk to companies, are really expecting to see this sort of program in place, that the company is checking in on their distributors from time to time to see what it is they're saying about the product. And if they're saying something that's incorrect, the company really needs to take action, or they're going to be you know, responsible for whatever those people are saying about the product. An example of that was a case a couple of years ago about a company selling guitar instruction DVDs. And the endorsements were posted online, appeared to be from ordinary consumers and reviewers. Endorsements were actually posted by affiliate marketers who received commissions for the sales, didn't disclose that they were affiliates, and the FTC outlined the monitoring program that we're talking about, that they had to set up a system to monitor the affiliates and what they were saying, basically monitoring something like the top 50 affiliates each month and 50 others randomly, and the non-compliance results could include termination of people. That was the system that they wanted in place based on that FTC action. Just kind of to sum up before I get to a few of the questions, and you know, if there are any others coming up as we approach the end of an hour, and I don't want to keep you all day. Again, for advertising, things have to be truthful, not misleading, and substantiated. An advertiser has to have substantiation for all claims made in any endorsements or testimonials. Endorsements are adopted by advertiser, so endorsements for food, beverage, and supplement products cannot indicate that they're intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent a disease. Material connections have to be disclosed, as we talked about, any financial, business, or personal connections. Experts have to have represented expertise. We didn't go into that so much, but again, if you have a doctor on there that's talking about products, the doctor should be related to the product. So you can't just have someone there in a white coat and say, I have a doctorate, and then it turns out that their doctorate is in philosophy as opposed to something related to the product. Testimonials imply expected results, and you have to disclose what those expected results might be. Companies need to monitor their affiliates, and disclosures, any disclosures that you make have to be clear and conspicuous. Results may vary is not sufficient. And again, the last thing I would say is, of course, we go back to You cannot sell a product to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent a disease. I'm going to try and address a few of the questions that we didn't get here, and then feel free to submit any others if you want to. I see one here talking about there's a huge line of supplements like more information on health claims in regard to nutrients. This is some information. It's hard for me to go through all of them now because there's a lot of them. There's about 20 different health claims. They are located in the Code of Federal Regulations at 101 between 101.74 and 101.93. And they really, again, address very specific conditions. I'd probably say it's something that you should check with the content team or with Julie as to whether those claims are permissible. And they also have to be made to a very specific wording and phraseology used. So it's something that you have to really make sure that you have the necessary requirements for them. In most of the essential oils, you're not going to have the necessary conditions because in order to make a health claim, in addition to the general requirements, it has to be low in fat, low in saturated fat, low in cholesterol, low in sodium. You also have to have 10% or more of the daily value of one of either vitamin A, vitamin C, calcium, iron, protein, or dietary fiber. Most of the essential oils are not going to fall into that category. But certainly with respect to other nutrients, I would suggest, again, talking with the content team, and I'm happy to provide some of the general information on that. Again, the FDA has a website and at fda.gov and a specific section on health claims that you could certainly check out also regarding that. Question here. Are testimonials shared on Facebook via friends or on Facebook groups valid, or can these be considered disease claims? Example, I feel awesome after taking multi-green supplements this morning. You should check these out. Or nitro has me feeling alert today. Love it. I mean, those are certainly permissible claims because those wouldn't be disease claims. Again, it all kind of goes to what is your position and relationship. Even on your personal website, if you make it clear that you're a distributor of the products, then claims that you make are going to be attributed to the company. I mean, obviously, if you're, run into a neighbor down the street and you're like, oh man, I've been taking this. I mean, the FDA is not they don't have, at least that I'm aware of, bugs on everything and anything where you are, like the show person of interest. So they're not going to do that. But you do have to take into account, if it's your own Facebook page and you've set it up as a distributor and marketer of Young Living products, then claims that you make on there are going to be attributed to Young Living. So again, you can say, Nitro has me feeling alert today, love it, or I feel awesome after taking multi-green supplements. But you couldn't say, Nitro has me feeling alert today and it has resolved my issues with attention deficit disorder, because that would be then going into addressing a disease condition. I'm going to let someone else, I'm not quite sure what the EODR means, so I'm going to let someone else address that at some time. And I'll let Julie address the availability of the PowerPoint afterwards as well, because I'm not sure what the specific availability is, other than I believe that I know it's being recorded, so I believe it will be available afterwards. There's a question here that says, can you please clearly lay out for us the language that we can use and give us examples? I can give you certainly some general examples. I can't right now give you specific examples for specific products because I don't have in front of me, because again, there's really a two-pronged process in making claims. They can't make disease claims, and you should have the science to back it up. So I don't have in front of me right now what the science is for particular claims. But as an example, for a lot of the products that I have, we'll see claims like helps regulate blood sugar already within normal or healthy limits. For claims related to blood pressure, blood sugar, and cholesterol, the claims really have to be kept to maintaining already normal or healthy levels. So helps support normal blood sugar levels, helps maintain blood glucose levels that are already within normal ranges, helps support healthy cholesterol levels. Those are for those types of conditions where you're worried about it going up or down, you really have to keep claims to maintaining normal conditions. Another claim that a lot of people like to talk about is joints, muscle pain, and inflammation. You can talk about pain related to a non-disease condition, but you have to specifically tie it to pain or inflammation to non-disease conditions. Most often that is exercise. So you can talk about a product that will help reduce inflammation associated with exercise, about reducing muscle soreness and muscle fatigue associated with exercise, but a general claim about this will help reduce pain will be considered a disease claim. I'm trying to think of some of the other specifics. Certainly supports or maintains a healthy digestive system is one of what. Any of the helping support or maintain systems are permissible. So you can say helps maintain a healthy cardiovascular system, helps support digestive health, assists with normal circulatory function. Any of those types of normal claims are generally permissible. Let's see, we've got a few other claims here, so I will try to address a couple more here, and then we'll have to move on. Let's see. Claims related to emotional or psychological states. Many emotional or even psychological conditions occur in a natural, normal state to some degree without qualifying as a disorder. I agree. In example, sadness is a normal, natural state in contrast to diagnosed major depressive disorder like manic depression or something else. And this goes back to kind of what I was talking a little bit before about stress, anxiety, depression. If it's a kind of a area where it could be either disease or non-disease, depending on the severity of it, then you can talk about it as long as you make sure that this is for the non-severe condition as opposed to the severe. So if you just say good for depression, it is at least a possibility that the FDA could treat that as a disease condition. So you need to clarify this is for the words that I most often suggest are temporary, mild, occasional are the words that would generally drive it more towards the natural or normal states as opposed to more severe conditions. Again, anxiety or tying it into something that's more normal. Get anxious before speaking, try this product, as opposed to some sort of severe anxiety disorder that keeps you in the house 23 hours a day. So again, I think it's specifying what level it is for will help a lot with addressing those types of claims. Whole foods come with several different juice ingredients. Can we share studies regarding specific ingredients like plum juice is a natural laxative and be in compliance? Again, you can share studies about specific ingredients. There are two things about studies that I guess that are important to know. You can share studies about specific ingredients, again, as long as those studies don't suggest disease treatment. So you can't talk about, and we just saw Palm Wonderful got hit again by the FTC for a lack of substantiation for a lot of their claims. You can't talk about pomegranate juice and it's reducing the risk of cancer, but you can talk about plum juice as being a natural laxative. So again, you can do that. The other important thing to remember when you're using studies is when you reference a study for a particular ingredient, you are essentially suggesting that your product that contains that ingredient will provide that benefit. So if you don't have enough of that ingredient in your product to provide the benefits, you shouldn't be talking about the benefits. So to tie it back to the question we had, someone asked about plum juice as a natural laxative. It's fine to talk about plum juice as a natural laxative, but if the study that they did talks about plum juice when it's, when it's, I don't know what, 6 milliliters, or it's 4 fluid ounces per day helps plum juice act as a natural laxative. But you only have 1 milliliter of plum juice in your product, then your product doesn't provide the benefits that you're talking about in that study. So you shouldn't be talking about studies that suggest benefits for an ingredient where you don't have that amount of the ingredient in your product. Otherwise, you're just giving people false hope. You're talking about plum juice is a great laxative, but it requires 4 fluid ounces, and we've only got 1 fluid ounce in this product. Unless you're telling people to take 4 servings of that product a day, they're not going to get the benefits. So you shouldn't be talking about the benefits. And that's the biggest problem I see with people talking about studies is you need to make sure that it supports the product that you're talking about. If someone asks in a Facebook group, hubby needs to maintain healthy blood pressure, what are some oils others have used for this? Is this okay? That would be permissible as long as you're confident that, in fact, there is evidence to show that that product will do it. I'll go a step further. What if in a Facebook group someone says, my husband has a huge blood pressure issue and it's always shooting, way above the healthy limits. What can I do to address this? You could probably phrase it in a way such that, well, we have a great product that helps maintain already healthy levels, and so you may want to look into this product to do it, but you can't talk about treating the high or overly over levels. See, we'll do 2 more here. According to research, XYZ may help reduce the risk of, can we say that? Well, again, it's not an issue of what substantiation there is according to research. Once you make that claim, you're making it about the product. So it's irrelevant that research says it. If it's talking about a reduction in the risk of disease, it's going to be treated as a disease claim regardless of what research is out there or what people are saying about it. At the end of the day, you can't make that claim if it's talking about reduction of a disease risk regardless of what substantiation there is. I'll go back one. I saw one other one. What about discussing cleansing of the liver, kidney, etc.? Detoxification claims are not specifically disease claims in the eyes of the FDA. To my knowledge, the FDA has not sent any warning letters to a company for making detox claims without addressing a specific disease. So, and I guess that's within reason. Certainly detoxification of the system from alcohol abuse would be considered a disease claim, but normal detoxification of the liver is not considered a disease claim. And again, I would go back to, as long as there is evidence to support that claim, then you can make it. It would be a permissible type of claim. I know that there were a few others, but they probably go a little bit more towards some of the internal with the content group. And if there's other specific claims that didn't get answered, please follow up with them, and I'm sure that I can follow up with them as well. Unless there's any other specific questions right now, I think we're going to wind it up, and I can turn it back over to Julie in case she has anything that she wants to say here.
Justin, thank you so much, and thank you for everyone who has participated on this call today. We really appreciate it. I hope that this was informative for you and helpful. If you have further questions, I encourage you to send them to conduct@youngliving.com, and we will get to them as quickly as we can. We appreciate your participation. Thank you so much, and thank you, Justin.